listening to Book 101 Review. No, take two, people. Take two. We are an abstract essay. And we changed also my music because this is not my music for abstract essay. Here we go. My apologies. Take two. Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Abstract Essay, where ideas take shape, thoughts find depth, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. Well, he is a health and safety, an author, and of course a fellow podcaster, none other than Mr. Desai Link.
Hello.
Welcome,
Thanks for having me
welcome.
on the show.
Yes, welcome, Mr. Desai on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Sure. You know already that my name is Desai. I'm a health and safety specialist. I formerly worked in law, but transitioned into health and safety because I wanted to effect some change at the front line. And part of that process inspired me to write a book about how we do investigations, which you can see on the screen now. It's called Beyond the Incident, and it's a practical guide to improving workplace safety investigations.
And Mr. Desai, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And today, let's talk about Beyond the Incident. Why most investigations miss the real lessons. So tell us, the military instills a specific mission oriented kind of resilience. How did you have to unlearn, reinterpret, or expand a definition of resilience to navigate the complexity of a civilian life on your new mission as an author?
Well, that's a big question, but I hope I can do it justice. There was coming from law into safety. There was some pretty significant gaps that I could see in the way that safety managed the collection of evidence when it came to an investigation, the way it balanced and weighed that evidence, and the way it interpreted that evidence in a causation analysis. Now, it sounds very technical, but really, when you actually go through the process, it's quite simple. So, when we talk about resilience, it's really a case of digging a bit deeper and finding out a little bit more about what went wrong and doing your best to learn about the incident rather than dismissing it or just blaming someone for making a mistake. Really digging a bit deeper and trying to learn something.
Mr. Desai, what is the first procedure if we have an incident happen?
The first thing I always say is we need to worry about the people. We need to rally around and identify who might be harmed or might be vulnerable and make sure that they're getting the care and attention that they need. So that could be medical care, it could be psychological care. They might not be directly connected to the incident, but they might still be affected by it. So the people come first. If we support and rally around those people and give them the support that they need, we're really placing ourselves and them in the best position possible.
Is there unnecessary steps that you will follow in terms of procedure?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a typical process when it comes to investigations, which is fairly universally considered to be the way things should be done, and that is to do your initial response to the incident, which I mentioned was part of that was people and concerning yourselves with them. And then after you've moved past your initial response, you move into an evidence gathering exercise. And here you're trying to understand what evidence might be applicable, gather that, record it, organize it, and go back and fact check some of the things that you might need to. And although I'm talking in the context of a workplace safety investigation, really this understanding of evidence and the way of managing that could be applied to many different research projects. So there's initial response, evidence, and then you want to move into the analysis of the evidence and understanding of what happened. And then you have your findings and recommendations that come out of that. So there's a fairly structured process, usually 4 or 5 steps.
Your book titles Beyond Incidents suggest most investigations stop too soon. What is the real lesson that conventional investigations consistently miss?
Well, there's quite a few that I can think of, but one in particular is stopping when we arrive at someone's behavior being incorrect or not what was expected, and determining that to be the cause of an incident. And typically, what I find is that an incident that stops there isn't digging deep enough. We're still not understanding why it happened. We're just understanding why that person did that particular thing. But there might be many reasons for that. And I can illustrate that with an example. We had in in my role a carpenter who was using a circular saw to cut a piece of wood. They were holding the circular saw in one hand and the piece of wood in another. The circular saw hit a knot in the piece of wood and kicked back. It suddenly kicked back and moved back, and the blade cut into the person's thumb. It's a pretty gruesome injury. Thankfully, they kept their thumb. There was no loss of function or anything like that, so that side of things was okay. But it's still a pretty serious incident, and we wanted to know, well, what went wrong here? Why did this happen? And it was pretty clear, talking to other carpenters, that you should never hold the piece of wood that you're cutting. You should always clamp it down on the table and have your hand well and truly away from the cutting piece. Maybe even have it 2 hands on the tool to stop the kickback. So this was obviously wrong. What this carpenter was doing was not the right process. So instead of stopping the incident there and saying that the person wasn't following the correct process, instead we dug a bit deeper. And when we dug a bit deeper, we found that their resume and their reference letters didn't marry up with each other. There was discrepancies in the dates and the organizations that they worked for. And we found that the recruitment agent that was sending these people, this carpenter from overseas, was actually fraudulently putting together their information and sending them to us unqualified. So we actually, the root finding here was that there was a fraudulent immigration or recruitment agent from overseas. And we actually learned quite a bit from that and made some changes accordingly.
Interesting, interesting indeed. Why is it instinct to find a root cause often just sophisticated way of finding someone to blame? And how does this shut down genuine learning, Mr. Desai?
I think there's a idea that there's justice needs to be served. And so when we talk about justice, we talk about a wrong that's happened, we talk about a victim, and we talk about a perpetrator. And so if we're seeking justice, we're usually seeking blame. And in the context of a workplace, that doesn't usually achieve very much. It might satisfy a person's desire for retribution, but it doesn't go much further than that. And what we really want to do is actually stop these types of incidents from happening. And we don't stop the incidents from happening by simply blaming someone. We need to understand the motivations, the circumstances they were put in that caused them to make that decision. So I think there's a propensity to blame people because it's the easy way out, and it feels like you're doing the situation justice. But if you take a step back and look at it from another perspective, you haven't actually learned anything. And that's the real goal.
The real goal indeed, and the illusion of single cause. You argue that the complex incidents rarely have a single root cause. What is the more accurate model for understanding how things go wrong, and why is it so difficult for organizations to accept this?
Well, human affairs are complex and humans are complex. So it's quite rare that a single root cause would be the cause of a workplace incident. It's much more helpful to look at things such as either multiple causes or contributors, whatever you want to call them, but just recognize that there's lots of things that influence and contribute and cause a incident to happen at varying degrees, and all of them are worthy of attention. If it's worth investigating, it's worth investigating well. And so it's worth expanding beyond a single root cause and looking at multiple contributors, multiple causes, and multiple influences upon the circumstances of an incident.
How does the common refrain of "they didn't follow the procedure" often mask deeper systemic issues that the investigation should be uncovering?
Well, there's a number of ways that can manifest. I mean, if a person's not following a procedure and we ask why, we could find out that they weren't aware of the procedure, that they weren't adequately trained, that the procedure was difficult to understand or difficult to apply. Um, it could be extenuating circumstances in the sense that the procedure, otherwise good, wasn't able to be applied to each different circumstance that a person might be faced with in the day. So there's lots of different ways that not following a procedure can actually be not the end of an investigation, but the start of learning something new about the procedure, about the person, and about the organization.
Mr. Desai, how does the common refrain of "they didn't follow the procedure" or "it's not according to our company policy"? What are the limitations of using those standardized checklists that form of that company that they're implementing?
Yeah, you're really thinking like that. You really rob yourself of the opportunity to investigate a bit deeper. If we go back to that carpenter example that I mentioned earlier, had we stopped at that point, we wouldn't have learned something significant, which is that the recruitment agent from overseas was sending us people who are untrained. Um, so you really being stuck in that mindset really robs you of the opportunity to gain some value out of investigating an incident. And really, investigating an incident is a great opportunity to learn. Um, in some jurisdictions, there's a legal imperative to investigate or to understand the causes of incidents. But notwithstanding that, it is a great opportunity to learn.
Indeed. And why are we so drawn to focusing on the actions of the persons of that sharp end and incident? And how does this ignore the blunt end pressure created by the organization?
Yeah, so we we have biases as humans, and I talk about this extensively in the book. But we like to attribute agency to people that they might not have had. We like to think that in the same circumstances we would have done something different or done something better. And it's all subconscious. We don't really know that we're making these judgments, but we're all human. We are all biased. And it's important to be aware of these judgments. And not being aware of these judgments can really blind you to further learnings and understandings that could come from an incident investigation. So the book really tries to address that, both the human element of the person involved in the incident and the human element of the person investigating the incident. Both are biased and both need to be managed and understood.
The storytelling problem, Mr. Desai. How does the pressure to create a simple linear narrative on an event force investigators to ignore contradictory data and messy complex realities?
Yeah, it's interesting how the story that we form in our minds about an incident can really influence the outcomes and our understanding of it. In the first instance, that comes from the language that we use. You know, if we use the word investigation, it conjures images of formal processes. If we use the word interview, we might be considering some sort of formalized process where you're in a room and being questioned heavily. And just simply changing the wording around, just saying, hey, we're just doing a bit of an inquiry into this and we just want to have a chat. And all of a sudden it starts to sound a bit different. So that's one way you can manage that. Another way you can manage it is to make sure that your evidence is collected well and understood to be evidence and not speculation or judgment or opinion, but you're actually looking at sensory evidence, which is supported by documentary evidence. Documents can be photos, videos, or actual documents. And by organizing that and assessing it and weighing it, you are making sure that the narrative has um, a good basis, a good strong foundation from which to then develop a story of what happened.
The investigator mindset, Mr. Desai. What is the fundamental shift in mindset from detective to what that an effective investigator must make to get the real lessons?
Yeah, I think there's a propensity for people to think that it's a detective role. Really, it's not. I think humble inquiry is probably a better way to phrase it. If you go in with a genuine concern and genuine humility in trying to understand what happens, I think that comes across in making the people that you speak to who were involved, who may be traumatized, a little bit more comfortable in speaking to you, understanding that they're not going to be judged. They're just sharing the information, sharing their story as they see it. So the idea of humble inquiry rather than as a detective sleuth, I think, is an important distinction to make. And being in that mindset of being respectful and humble really makes a big difference. People tend to open up a bit more, and you tend to get a richer, fuller story of what happened.
Mr. Desai, your book likely touches on the principle that we must understand how things usually go right to understand why we are sometimes go wrong. How can we investigate everyday performance?
Well, given your willingness to invest in an investigation or an inquiry into everyday practice, whether that's something going right or wrong, there's something to learn in each of those things. And I think the techniques and tools that I set out in the book can equally be applied to um, a a report, which might be going to the board, or maybe the board might turn around and say, "Hey, we want an inquiry into this particular aspect of the business, whether there's been an incident or not." It might even be a something positive that happened that they want to understand a bit better. So these techniques and tools can be applied across the business in varying different ways. And I think the important thing to realize is that depending on the circumstances, you might have to cherry pick some of the tools, exercising your best judgment to do so, and apply them to the situation rather than trying to get the situation to fit with whatever method you're using.
What are the some key questions an investigator should ask to move beyond individual error and explore design, environment, leadership, and cultural factors, Mr. Desai?
I think there's different questions at different points in the investigation. So, certainly, if you're interviewing someone, the best thing you can say or the best question you can ask is actually not a question at all. It's just merely saying, hey, tell me the story of what happened. And as you move on through the investigation, you will need to analyze the evidence that you've gathered. And I think there's three key questions that you can ask there as well. What directly contributed to the incident? And this is a counterfactual question. So if this didn't happen, would the incident still have occurred? The next question you want to ask is, did this particular thing increase the risk of the incident happening? And then the third question would be, is there anything leading up to this incident that didn't happen as expected? And I think if you're asking those three questions, you're getting quite a comprehensive inquiry into the evidence that you've gathered on the basis of an incident.
What are the critical steps or critical first steps a team should take immediately after the incident to preserve the right data and set the stage for a learning focused investigation?
Sure. So it probably starts before you have an incident, and that is you want to set up a reporting and investigation process that invites collaboration and participation so that when an incident does occur, you can put that straight into action. Now, contemporaneous evidence from direct observation is the best evidence you can get your hands on, and that comes from talking to people. So the best thing you can do is talk to people as soon as possible after the incident. Sometimes you're not going to be able to do that. They might be injured and getting medical attention. They might be traumatized. But getting information and evidence that is contemporary or as close to it as the incident is very important.
Important indeed. And Mr. Desai, beyond the obvious risks of repeat incidents, what is the hidden cultural and operational cost of conducting poor blame focused investigations?
Well, yes, you're absolutely right in the sense that you're kind of doomed to repeat the incident if you don't invest thoroughly enough in understanding and learning about them. But I think one of the great benefits that can come from it is a degree of organizational resilience. An organization is better positioned to understand its own operations and therefore how it's going to respond to other difficult situations, which will happen. Things don't stay the same. Change is the only constant. So it's important to be resilient for future incidents and future unexpected circumstances. And you're only resilient if you understand who you are and what you're doing.
What is the single most important thing a leader can do to create a culture where people feel safe to report nuances and near misses without fear of punishment?
This is a topic that's hotly debated within safety circles. And what I can say is that having a clear process and a clear outcome can assist. Some people frame that as no blame. That is, if you put your hand up and admit that an incident's happened and that you may have caused it, you won't get any sort of disciplinary outcome from that. You won't be blamed. Another alternative is just culture. And this says that if you put your hand up and an incident happens and that concerns you, there will be a process to determine how your behavior contributed to that and what level of outcome or consequence will come from that. Depending on your methodology, I think it's important to be clear about what is going to happen and clear about your expectations so that workers and those involved in incidents know what to expect.
know what to expect for sure. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, Mr. Desai, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my Bible verses 101 in its first season, book 101 review in fifth season, comedy 101 in third season, and food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 and fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love letters in fourth season, as well as my movie 101 review and music 101 and science 101 and sex 101 in its second season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Desai, if you could leave our audience with one principle to revolutionize how they think about investigation, and what would it be?
I would say treat them as an opportunity to learn and use the opportunity to understand how to learn better. And you can do that by understanding evidence and understanding causation. So I encourage you to read up on about that. Obviously, I include that in the book, but just be curious and be open to learning.
Just be curious, people, and open your eyes and learn. Thank you, Mr. Desai Link, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your book, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Thanks very much. It's been a great pleasure.
Yes, so where do people can reach you or buy your book, Mr. Desai?
So the book's available on Amazon. If you search for Beyond the Incident or my name, it should come up fairly easily for you. And you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with any listeners. Thank you.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Desai Link, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering advocacy to come, more and more empowering book like this to come. So, Mr. Desai, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks very much.
More to come, people. See you soon.